This is Football Night in America, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Football Night in America podcast. Thank you so much for joining us as we break down Week 17. Maria Taylor alongside Matthew Berry. We've got Mike Florio. Devin McCourty is back, ladies and gentlemen, with the biggest turtleneck we've ever seen.
Nice.
Yeah, Jason Garrett holding down the fort on the end. We will be paying attention to Jason today. Everyone except Matthew, because the Commanders game is still on.
Damn right, I'm owning that.
Let's start with the game that we were all focused on, is the NFC North game, the Vikings and the Packers. And at the end of the day, I mean, it ended up being a close game, but the Vikings dominated offensively. Sam Darnold had a career day. They were throwing water at him in the locker room. And what was your takeaway from what the Vikings were able to do against the Packers, Coach?
I just was so impressed with Minnesota offensively. You know, there was attention given to Justin Jefferson early on in this game, and Sam Darnold seamlessly got other guys involved, Addison, Naylor, Hawkinson. He threw it to his backs, and then Justin got involved as the game wore on. So to me, it's a sign of his maturity in this offense. It's been a great marriage between O'Connell and Darnold all year long. And as we've talked about all day, and then when they play ahead, you know, that defense, what Flores has done over there, makes it really hard on the opposing offense. It's an impressive win.
I'm always blown away by the way this Minnesota team, they just complement each other so well. Anything that goes on in a game that's negative, they just respond and help each other and have each other's back. Sam Darnold throws an interception. Then Green Bay goes in and scores. Minnesota gets the ball back on offense. They drive down the field and they score a touchdown. Then later in the game, Minnesota can't get the stop. The Green Bay brings them within 2 points. Now you're like, oh, all the pressure's on the offense. They pick up the first down. You say, you know what, defense, you're done for today. We're going to end with the ball in our hands. They just continue to rise to the occasion. No matter how the game looks, and we got our guy Florio every time Minnesota comes on. He's like, they're going to lose.
He had the sweater on today,
I can't believe I can't. But they find a way to win. And if they finish this season playing Detroit with the #1 seed, you have to believe, Florio.
I already do.
You have to believe.
I've already decided they're going to be the #1 seed. The question is what's going to happen in the postseason. But what they did today to the Packers was a lot like what happened back in Week 4. In Week 4, they were up 28-0, and then the foot slips off the gas pedal. The Packers storm back, but the Vikings found a way that day to close it out. Same thing today. When the Vikings get the ball back up 27-25 with 2 minutes and change, 3 timeouts plus a 2-minute warning, that's a pretty thin margin for error for the Vikings, and they get 2 first downs, force them to use the timeouts. That's it. That's the kind of thing that, you know, I think that's better for a team than winning by 17 because you become confident you can pull it off in the postseason when you're in a tough game. So they've had several games like that this year where Sam Darnold's had to go get a first down in a big spot. He didn't do it against Detroit. He's done it every other time. It's one of the reasons why they're 14-2.
It feels like sometimes they do let they get out to big leads and they let teams back in, and then they've sort of got to go on some last-second drive to sort of close out the clock. But they are doing that. And you know, Coach, you were talking about Sam Darnold. You're absolutely right. 8 different players on the Vikings caught passes today. And I love this stat. Sam Darnold is the 4th quarterback in NFL history to throw 35 or more touchdown passes with a team in his first year. Here are the other 3. Matthew Stafford in L.A. They won the Super Bowl that year. Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. They won the Super Bowl that year, Mike Florio. And then Peyton Manning in Denver.
Lost in the divisional round.
Don't leave that out.
Hey, 2 out of 3 is not bad. I mean,
It's time to balance it out, 2-2.
He's Peyton Manning, 2 out of 3. And so I'm just saying, like, when you can sit there and say, I'm on a list with Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning, it's a hell of a story for Sam Darnold and what that entire team has done.
Maria, can I just say one thing about Devin's comment about their team and how they respond to different situations? One thing I know about leadership, certainly at the head coach position, is the energy of the leader pervades the group. And so the poise and composure that Kevin O'Connell demonstrates all throughout the game, when they have success and when they have some adversity, it reflects in how his team plays and how they respond. There's a lot of coaches who talk about being poised and they're jumping up and down on the sidelines throwing their headsets. Well, they see that. The Vikings see the leadership that Kevin O'Connell has, and they've embodied it. Not unlike Dan Campbell in Detroit, you know, they're the personification of those guys, and it's been really impressive.
And I thought this before this year. Kevin O'Connell was like Bud Grant with a smile on his face, because Bud Grant was the same way. He just always had that stoic demeanor, but he never got too excited, never got upset, never was too high, never was too low. And O'Connell's the same way. It's just he's got a more easygoing manner about him, and it clicks with the players.
No doubt it does.
He was in the locker room, just in the corner while they were showering Sam Darnold, and he's just like, yeah, that's my guy. That's my boy. That's my boy.
And
My boy's all
he
grown
engineered
up.
it. That's the thing. Yeah. He engineered it. He was pushing Darnold on those guys all year long, and now all he has to do is stand back, and they pick Darnold up and splash him with water, and he's their guy.
This might be for another day, but he needs to be their quarterback next year.
Yes.
You can't let that guy out the building.
I agree. No. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Come a long way this year.
Yep.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you start thinking about next week against the Detroit Lions, Detroit's so beat up on defense. The other thing about Minnesota, and some of this comes down to luck, but they're healthy. The Vikings are generally healthy. They've got compared to the Lions. Compared to the Lions, Aaron Jones got a little bit of nicked up. I know Darisaw did as well, but generally speaking, the Vikings complete team. On offense and on defense, they need to clean up special teams a little bit. They missed a tough field goal, but I don't know. Mike, I think you're allowed to smile about your Vikings.
Listen, I will say this. I heard you earlier for that thing the three of you were doing. It sure sounds like you're picking the Lions.
He said,
I'm not betting against him. I'm not. That's right. So your hands off the checker for the Lions. My hands off the checker for the Vikings. The red vest is on the line, baby.
Yeah, he talking spicy.
It's not. No, it's not.
There's one thing he knows. He knows his record with that red vest.
Coast to coast. I mean, you don't get it back with one game. Are you kidding me? That's like you've lost 100 in a row, double or nothing, and you get it.
I'm only one behind you. I'm only one behind you.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, it could come down to the game.
What does that red vest mean anyway, Maria?
Sure in the lead, but as you can see,
I've had it all year long.
Week 18, Lions-Vikings could come down to a lot should we have to actually pick that game. But let's talk about it because the 1 seed in the NFC up for grabs. The loser is going to end up with the 5 seed. We talked about the record that it's going to make in NFL history. We've never seen 2 teams meet in the regular season with at least 13 wins. And the fact that one of those teams could end up being a 5 seed, I mean, it's almost crazy to think about, but I think this is what we thought maybe the NFC North would look like and what the NFC would ultimately look like coming down the stretch.
Yeah, it's been the best division in football all year long, and these teams continue to get better. I'm so impressed with Detroit overcoming all the injuries and still week in and week out finding ways to win. And Minnesota, to me, has gotten progressively better and better and better. So these 2 elite teams facing each other in Week 18, you couldn't write it any better than this.
And the interesting thing will be one of these teams has to lose, right? And I think both these teams have to realize whether we win or we lose, we should feel pretty damn good about ourselves going into the playoffs. So whether you're the 1 seed and you're like, hey, we're going to be at home, you shouldn't get comfortable. That doesn't mean anything. The teams lose at home all the time in the playoffs. But if you go to the 5th seed and you have to go on the road, if I'm Minnesota or I'm Detroit, I still feel like, hey, we're the favorite to get to where we want to get. It's just going to be a different road. So I think that's going to be a big takeaway from this game because it's going to be devastating when you play in a game of this stakes and what's going into this when you lose. But you got to pick yourself back up because next week you're going to go play in a playoff game and a chance to still hopefully get to the Super Bowl.
Here's the craziest part, right? So we're talking about the Vikings and Lions. One's going to be the 1 seed, one's going to be the 5. But the Packers, who, everyone's going to be like, tough loss. The Packers have lost 5 games this year. They've lost to the Lions twice, the Vikings twice, and the Eagles. The Packers are going to be like the 6 or the 7 seed. If Washington wins out, the Packers would actually be the 7th seed. They're the 3rd team in their division, and that's a hell of a football team. They played really well.
You got to beat the best teams in the playoffs.
I understand. So, I'm just saying the Packers are going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs. They're that's a crazy division.
To think about. No
crazy
doubt.
to think about the Packers are the 3rd best team in that division.
I feel like no matter what happens next week, the Lions and the Vikings are destined to meet in the postseason. The only question is going to be where, based upon next week. And it won't matter because both teams can go into the other team's building and win. I almost feel like the Packers are going to cross paths with the Lions or the Vikings again in the postseason at some point. It could be that those 3 teams are still alive when we get to divisional weekend.
And you don't want to play your divisional opponent for a 3rd time in the playoffs.
No.
Trust me, I've dealt with that before. I've dealt with that.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Same here. It wasn't a good result.
We don't want to have bad memories here. Let's go back to some good ones, and that's for the Bills and the Eagles. They both lock up the 2 seeds. And we saw Saquon Barkley get over 2,000 yards rushing. We all love the post he had with all of his offensive linemen. How about those boys? And the Eagles playing without Jalen Hurts. I mean, they relied on Saquon Barkley. It still worked, we would say, but now the opportunity for the Eagles to have that 2 seed and looking forward to their next matchup against the Giants. What do you think maybe the Eagles should be doing in the final game of the regular season?
I think just getting some of those guys get reps. I mean, again, we don't know the status of Jalen Hurts. Mike talked about this on football night. We don't know where Jalen Hurts is in that 5-step concussion protocol. And concussions are nonlinear injuries that Cedric Tillman's still been, Cedric Tillman's been out for 6 weeks with a concussion. So I think you want to get Kenny Pickett more reps. It was good that Tanner McKee, I'm sure they didn't want him to play, but it was good that he got a few reps as well, because the Eagles, they're going to need a quarterback to run that system. But credit to them, Kenny Pickett came in, I thought he played well, right? Dallas showed up for the first half or so, but then they just got worn down. But if I'm Nick Sirianni, I think you play those guys. I mean, Devin and Coach can talk about this better than I can, but I think you play them for at least a half. I think you want to keep them in some sort of rhythm, and I think you definitely want to at least get Kenny Pickett some reps. I think that's important.
Yeah, Pickett had not one but 2 appointments with the guy that Sims and I refer to as Dr. Needle to get the injection so he could play with the broken ribs, and he'll find a way to go with broken ribs the rest of the year if he has to, if Jalen Hurts isn't cleared. But we're talking about the playoff seeding. I mean, the Eagles could be hosting the Packers or the Commanders in the wild card round. That's not going to be an easy win for them. If Green Bay gets another crack at the Eagles, I don't care that it's in Philadelphia. I wouldn't want to see Green Bay come in if I'm Philly after that game they played. I know it was week 1, but the Packers are still a team that could beat them. So they need Hurts back. They need everybody healthy. And they need to think twice about exposing Saquon Barkley to injury next week just to get him the single-season rushing record.
And it's interesting because if Hurts is healthy, he misses this week, he sits out next week, so that would be 2 weeks not playing football. So if you do want to get him out there, you can't get him out there without putting your starting offensive line out there. So now once you put your starting quarterback and your starting offensive line out there, do you sit your 2-star receivers and your star running back? There's so much that goes into this, and I think the number one thing you have to start with is the overall health of your team. If guys are hurt and they're banged up, you have to deal with that first. And I think once you deal with that and you say, all right, this is where this guy is, this is where this guy is, you have to determine, okay, this team that I'm coaching this year, how do they best operate? Can I give them time off and still feel like we're going to get their best football a week from now? If not, who are those guys we feel comfortable with? All right, if we sit more guys on offense, how's the defense going to – there's so much that goes into this, and so much is talked about with Nick Sirianni and how much do the guys listen to him. All of those things, like being in New England when Coach Belichick said, hey, this guy's playing a half, this guy's going to play. Guys might have been pissed, but you didn't say anything. You took it and you went out there and you played even though you felt like, man, how's he coming out and I'm still in? That didn't matter because there was a certain level of respect and people said, hey, if we follow what he's telling us, we'll win a championship. And I remember in 2014, we played a half against Buffalo and then we went on in 2014 and won a Super Bowl. So, hey, it worked, but there's other scenarios where it doesn't work. So I think Sirianni has to really think about how all that maps out and what he feels comfortable with.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I've had it a couple times when I was a player and a couple times when I was a coach. And I think for me, when I reflect back on the times when I was a coach, I would go back and play our guys if we had the opportunity to do it. In 2016, we're 13-2. We went to Philadelphia, and you said it. We were banged up. A couple guys in the offensive line were hurt. A couple guys in the defensive line were hurt. So we were trying to get them healthy. And so we said, okay, if they're not going to play, we got to be careful of putting this guy in and all of that. So it kind of snowballed, and we didn't play great in the game, and I don't know that it had any impact in the playoffs, but you just come out of that game with a different feeling. The other part of this equation is typically you're talking about the number 1 seed. That's the scenario we had. Yep. Okay, when you're the number 2 seed and you're playing next week and you know you're playing, that's a little bit of a different story. The idea that you say, okay, you're not going to play in the last week and then you're going to have 2 more weeks off before you play again, that becomes a different there are too many different variables there. So I do think the health of the team is the number 1 factor. But if you can play the guys, play them. These guys have won 11 out of 12 games in Philadelphia. Stay on that roll.
I will say they have the perfect superstar in the sense of Saquon Barkley. Coach, you coached him. It's a guy who said, I don't care. I'm not trying to go for a record. I'm trying to build something special, whatever, Coach Sirianni. So there's not going to be any, drama around this as well, because not every player would have the same attitude that Saquon does.
No doubt about it. It's a special record.
Yes, it is.
As a fan now, not playing, I'm like, man, send him out there, go get it. You want to see it.
It's a special record, and it's very reachable, very doable. Yeah. He's gotten over 100 yards in 11 games so far this season, so we know that he could do it. Before we get to Steve Kornacki, I just want to ask you guys, do you want to update your Super Bowl picks now as we go into Week 18? Who are you going with?
Give me the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes.
the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah, listen,
Don't fall for that, Florio.
He's putting a little pressure on Florio.
It is a little
Vikings to date are 11th in total offense. They're top 5 passing offense. They're 4th in scoring defense as well. They to me, you can sit there and every other team you sort of say like that's a problem, that's a problem. Philadelphia would be the other team that I think is the most complete on both sides, but Detroit's so banged up. Buffalo, you have questions about the defense. The Chiefs are too easy and fun. That's the obvious pick. I'll go fun and say the Vikings.
I don't know about a Vikings-Chiefs rematch in the Super Bowl, but, I mean, I've been following that team for 50 years now. I discovered the NFL, the Immaculate Reception game, December 23, 1972. For some reason, didn't become a Steelers fan. And I've been through it all. And I've seen the highs and lows. And my son has convinced me.
We're not making it about you, though.
No, we're not, but I am. My son has convinced me. I'm going somewhere with this, Your Honor. My son has convinced me to just enjoy it and not get freaked out about it and just trust the objective belief that this team is good enough. And they've got something special going on. I was saying earlier, second half of that Cardinals game, something clicked for the offense, and they've been more than good enough ever since then. And so I take a step back, I set aside all my neuroses and anxieties, and I say, this is the team that's going to win the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Where'd it go?
Two Vikings.
We're proud of you. It took 17 weeks to get us here, but we are here now.
I mean, and it took a whole speech. Who are you picking? He gave us everything to say, I'm picking my Vikings.
Yeah.
It was either that or the Hoover speech from Animal House when, they storm out of the room, but I went with that one.
We got to look at Jason for that reference. You know me and Maria.
You guys need to know that. Come on.
I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens.
Hoover, one of them.
Over my head. I'm going Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson gets his Super Bowl this year.
Okay.
I think this has been a good year for them. They've kind of fallen by the wayside. And last year was like, they're the 1 seed, they're going to win it. This year they get to just play football, and I think this is the year.
I'm going to take us back to the tunnel at Arrowhead Stadium, week 1. It was raining. Remember it was raining?
Yeah.
Raining hard. And Devin was just fighting all comers about whether or not the Kansas City Chiefs can three-peat. And they played 16 games, Dev. 16. They've won 15 of them.
Pretty damn good.
Yeah, they've been good. And they played their best game last week on Christmas. They went to Pittsburgh and they dominated the Steelers, a team that, I think some people felt like would give them a little bit of a fight. Afterwards, Kelsey and Mahomes come in with the Santa Claus deal. Andy comes in. He's wearing the Santa suit.
I don't like it. Last year they lost on Christmas and they won. They're just winning too much.
But I almost feel like they're going into that same overdrive deal that they went into last year. And, I'm betting on the head coach. I'm betting on the defensive coordinator, the special teams coordinator, most importantly on the quarterback. So
I'm feeling like my clip.
I say Kansas City.
Don't forget Arrowhead.
I'm feeling like my clip is going to be aired a lot. I'm getting this little feeling that it's going to be the Chiefs Super Bowl and there's going to be, they will not win it. Yeah.
Who's your biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC?
To me, I think Buffalo is. Hey, you mentioned Baltimore. I mean, there are good teams there, but there have been good teams in the past, and they just seem to find a way. And in the big moments, they seem to make all the plays. But I love those other teams. I love the Bills. I love what Josh Allen's doing, what Lamar's doing. The Baltimore defense has gotten significantly better. So all those teams are going to be tough outs.
One team had them beaten at Arrowhead, but for the inability to execute a field goal. And that was the Denver Broncos, the team they have a chance to knock out next week. But they're not going to do that. They're expected to rest Patrick Mahomes and other starters and give Denver a chance to be the 7th seed. If they would somehow win in Buffalo, then they come to Arrowhead in the divisional round. That would be something.
And what happens if Cincinnati sneaks into the playoffs and Joe Burrow gets a chance at them? I've seen that before.
It's going to be fun. The playoffs are going to be great. We're going to enjoy it. And that's these guys' best guesses at the Super Bowl. We have Steve Kornacki here, who actually knows the truth about stakes in Week 18.
Thanks,
so,
Maria.
Steve, tell us what's at stake.
Well, let's take a look at the AFC, where there are now 3 teams in contention for that final spot. The Broncos right now sitting in the 7th and final spot. We got a checklist here, a playoff checklist for each team, what it would take to get in. And look, for the Broncos, we wouldn't even be having this discussion if they could have just checked this box on Saturday, beating Cincinnati. They were almost there, didn't get it done, so they missed that chance. But if the Broncos can beat the Chiefs Week 18, that would be enough. They'd clinch it. None of this would matter here. So that's sort of outstanding. But if the Broncos lose that game, then it opens up possibilities here for the Dolphins and for the Bengals. A Broncos loss would be one of the checks. That's supposed to be a check mark. Would be one of the checks that each one of these teams needs. And you see with that Broncos loss, The Dolphins would only need one more thing to happen. They would just need to beat the New York Jets. And the Dolphins then at 9-8 would get in as the 7 seed. Now for the Bengals, that means obviously they need not just a Denver loss next week, they also need the Dolphins to lose to the Jets. And if that's starting to ask for a lot, they would also need one more thing. They'd need to win at Pittsburgh. If all three of those things happen for the Bengals, then they would move into the 7th spot. They were 4-8 a month ago. They'd close the year with a 5-game winning streak. They would go to play Buffalo, and if you gave them truth serum, the Bills probably wouldn't want the Bengals as their opponent, but that's what it would take to get the Bengals in there. Meanwhile, NFC, how about this story here? The race for the 1 seed. Now, right now, the Vikings holding off the Packers, tentatively sitting in that number 1 spot right now at 14-2, but that's because the Lions at 13-2 have the Monday night game against the 49ers. What it comes down to is no matter what happens, though, in the Monday night game, Vikings-Lions, Week 18, that's going to be what decides the top seed. You can see here the 61% probability that the Lions get the top seed. A lot of that is because the Week 18 game is in Detroit. Home field advantage there. Whatever happens in this game, it's been a while. It's been a quarter of a century since the Vikings got the top seed in the NFC. Now, that was the Randall Cunningham team there in 1998, lost to the Falcons in the NFC title game. And in half a century of seeding by the NFL in the playoffs, the Lions have never had the top seed. And the drama here is only heightened because not only is this a battle for the top seed, for the bye, for home field advantage, because the teams are from the same division, whoever does not get the number 1 seed will tumble all the way back to number 5, will make the playoffs as a wild card team, and will go on the road. The possibility certainly exists. You could have a 14-win wild card team, something we've never seen before. Previously, the best record ever for a wild card team, it was the Tennessee Titans, 1999. They were 13-3. That was the Music City Miracle team that just stopped short in the last minute there against the Rams in that Super Bowl. This would be the first ever if we do see a 14-win wild card team.
Now it could be the Motown Miracle team with the Detroit Lions. Steve, is this your last week?
I think it might be. There's,
No, this is it. No more Steve Kornacki?
It's been fun, guys.
You're amazing. Round of applause. Round of applause. The best thing that happens at the end of the season, as someone who is expected to know the playoff probability stuff, is Steve Kornacki coming in with a notebook and a board to break it all down so we don't have to think about it. Like, he helps us out so much. So let's go into our New Year's resolutions. Ours is to bring Steve Kornacki in a little bit sooner next year. And the resolutions that you guys have for these teams, okay, we've got 3 of them. Let's start with the Colts, who were eliminated today after losing at the Giants.
I think their New Year's resolution needs to be focus. Like, they were still alive for a playoff berth, and they lose to Drew Lock and the Giants. And it feels like this happens a lot to them, where they have big moments and they lose focus, whether it's to Jacksonville or something. Like, that's what they need is focus. I don't know why that team is so inconsistent.
Yeah, and I think it's culture, right? It just feels like something's missing there from that standpoint. The effort that's being put in or not put in, all the issues that percolated with Anthony Richardson that got him benched, and then he was back. And who knows what his future is. You see different reports about whether or not he's the guy moving forward. Shane Steichen says, I control what I can control when asked about his job security. You got to wonder about Chris Ballard. He's the guy that's been dealing with this revolving door at the quarterback position and not getting a winner since Andrew Luck retired. It's a tough spot. And Jim Irsay is an erratic and unpredictable owner. Whatever he does, they just need to turn, like the Commanders did, turn the culture in the right direction, because they're missing something that's keeping them from being competitive.
They got to work on just the finish. And, you know, last year they draft Anthony Richardson. He starts. He's kind of productive for him. He gets hurt. So then you're playing in a chance to make the playoffs last year, but you're playing with Gardner Minshew, not the guy of your future. Then this year you have a chance to stay alive. Anthony Richardson gets hurt, so you put Joe Flacco in there. So I understand, like, you got to focus, the culture, but you just got to finish a little bit better. And some of these things have been unfortunate that they're not playing the game exactly the way they would want to play the game with the guys they would want out there.
Yeah, for me, it's patience, a little bit along those lines. They've been close. I just keep going back to Shane Steichen a couple years ago in Philadelphia and the job he did with Jalen Hurts. And I do think that's the image that they have for the quarterback, Anthony Richardson, there. So if he can stay healthy and they can stay on that path one more year, they made the investment, there have been some bright spots, and if they can kind of make it about him and he can stay healthy week in and week out, I think that gives them a chance, particularly in the division that they're in.
Sorry, I was watching the game.
That's what you do. I'm not offended, Maria.
Commanders are in the red zone. I don't blame you.
3-point game.
It's the end of the quarter.
Handle Commanders, hail victory.
Jets, disastrous game against the Bills. What is their resolution?
Their resolution is no quick fixes. I feel like the Jets are constantly in like, let's try to put a band. Okay, let's go get Aaron Rodgers. Let's go do this. How about trying to build something, trying to build a culture and a foundation there, right? You're going to need a new general manager. I don't know what's going to happen with a head coach, but I'm assuming they're going to get a new head coach. Like, try to just build up a foundation and a level of culture and just not try to go for the quick fix. I understand you're in New York and there's headlines. You've got an owner that wants to win right now and is trying to win the back page of the newspapers and everything like that. But I just feel like that's the biggest problem for the Jets is that they don't have, Coach, you talked about patience earlier. I think no quick fixes should be there. Try to build something the right way.
When I first started working with Cris on PFT Live, he had an Aaron Rodgers song that went, "Oh, Aaron Rodgers," and I'll spare you the rest. It needs to be, "No, Aaron Rodgers," and they need to do that right away because he clearly wants out. He keeps needling Woody Johnson. You like that, didn't you? He keeps needling Woody Johnson, so let's not play this game. Let's just move on. Let's make it known to him. Let's make it known to the world. Because why would the new regime want the quarterback whose acquisition is the thing that caused everything to collapse? Now you got Garrett Wilson, star receiver, offensive rookie of the year in 2022. He reportedly may want to be traded if Aaron Rodgers comes back. I think they just need to rip off the Band-Aid, move on, don't play games. Aaron, we can tell you don't want to be here. Get out and we're moving forward.
They need to huddle up. There's a lot going on, right? You got people talking about the grandson, Brick Johnson, being heavily involved in the team. You got the Aaron Rodgers drama. You got Garrett Wilson. There's so many. Hey, guys, hold on. Bring it in here. Huddle up. Well, wherever they meet in their facility, bring everybody in there. Bring everybody that's going to be a decision maker. If Brick's going to be a decision maker, bring him in too. Let's huddle up. Let's create what we want. Let's talk about it. Let's put vision boards up. Let's do all of that before any decisions are made. And let's not be in the back page of the news. Let's get away from all of that and try to be aligned. You always talk about alignment in an organization. Let's work on our alignment before we hire anybody else. Let's make sure the people who are here are aligned, and then let's go and try to get this thing right.
Yeah, I love that. I love all your answers. My friend Brad Johnson, who played for a long time, Super Bowl winning quarterback, he played for Bobby Bowden at Florida State. And Bobby Bowden used to always say, hey, let's go kind of sit under a shade tree. Well, have you ever been to Florham Park, where the Jets facility is? Literally in the middle of their practice fields, they have this gigantic shade tree. And so that huddle that you're talking about, get everybody up under that shade tree and let's sit down and talk and let's get aligned. And we can say all we want about Aaron Rodgers this or Aaron Rodgers that. The Jets have not been good for a long time. They haven't been good for a long time. So there just needs to be a reset. There needs to be patience. You can't get caught up in what the Daily News and the New York Post are saying. You got to stay focused and you got to make the right decisions. I keep thinking about the decision that Atlanta made to draft Michael Penix with the 8th pick of the draft a month after they signed Kirk Cousins to an $80 million contract. And the best decisions you make in personnel are not need-based, and they're not necessarily always publicly supported. It's stuff that you believe in, and that's what they need to do. They need to just make building block decisions. You win in this league by making building block cornerstone players on your team. And you have this guy, and then you have this guy, and then you have this guy. And before you know it, you have these guys who are leaders, and you have multi-tiered leadership. That's what they need. And they need to get alignment from ownership all the way down to their players. And it starts with the people you bring in. It's a people business. All successful organizations are. So start with picking the right guys to be your general manager and head coach. Get everybody aligned. Go underneath that shade tree. Pick the cornerstone players. Don't think that you're going to win next year. The idea is just build it. Build it. Nick Saban talks about process, right? Everybody talks about process. That's what we're talking about. Get the right guys together, do things the right way, and the scoreboard will take care of itself. They need to have that mentality in that organization.
One thing real quick, too. Woody Johnson, once he hires the new GM and coach, needs to get out of it because the more he's meddled this year, the more the wheels have come off of the team.
Owners own the team for a reason. They spend a lot of money on their teams. So the idea that we're just going to remove the owner from it, I don't think that's realistic. They want to be involved in it. That's why they bought the team. They're billion-dollar organizations. So I think the bigger thing is the leaders, the head coach and the general manager, they have to be great communicators with ownership to get everybody aligned. You have to lead upward in organizations just as much as you need to lead downward. So they just need to get everybody on the same page and get him to understand why they want to make the decisions they make. And I think they have a chance.
Yeah,
Okay.
Owners can be involved, but at some point they have to listen to the football people. At some point they have to
Absolutely.
understand what their role in the organization is, and let the people you've hired to do a job, let them do that job.
But the
right?
football people have to communicate well with ownership.
Correct.
Everybody has a boss.
For sure. 1,000%.
And I'm your boss, and I'm here to tell you that speed round wasn't very speedy.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try this one more time.
You
okay?
weren't paying attention anyway.
I wasn't. Trying to get to the fourth quarter of this game. Okay? All right, we don't have much time left, guys.
Could have been eating popcorn.
This
hot
one,
dog,
right, a
spaghetti, what would
pepperoni
be that?
sausage thing
That's
that you
right,
brought in.
pepperoni roll. Get it
Okay,
right.
tell me, we're gonna tell the truth here. Which team most regrets moving on from their 2018 first round pick? Is it the Browns with Baker Mayfield when they took him #1 overall? Is it the Giants with Saquon Barkley, #2 overall, or the Jets with Sam Darnold, #3 overall?
I'm going to say it's the Browns with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield had success in Cleveland. Bunch of different coaches and offense coordinators, but he won a road playoff game with them. He had a good rookie year as well. And so I think they bailed on Baker Mayfield, and they didn't have the right organization around him. I think they bailed too soon, and given the complete disaster that is the quarterback position in Cleveland right now, to me, they're the team that regrets the most.
I agree completely. Look, it gets to what we were talking about with Woody Johnson. Jimmy Haslam, the Browns have been bad since he bought the team for a reason. He's too involved. He doesn't let the guys that have been hired to run the team do it. He imposes his will on them. Deshaun Watson was all him. Nobody else is claiming credit for it. It was all him. And once they started flirting with Deshaun Watson, that's when it fell apart with Baker Mayfield. They couldn't keep Baker Mayfield once they started down the Deshaun Watson path. And then when Deshaun told him no thanks, they had to offer him $230 million fully guaranteed over 5 years to get him to say, okay, I'll come play for you. And it's been a nightmare ever since. So it's not just giving up on Mayfield and doing the worst trade and sign in NFL history.
Yeah, I agree. And why I picked Baker was I looked at where all these teams are right now. The Giants, you put Saquon back on that team, it's still a struggle. The Jets, Sam Darnold back on the team. I look at it, Baker Mayfield's playing on that Cleveland Browns team. This team's probably in the playoffs. Like they're out there competing. They had a good defense. They have good pieces on there. Baker Mayfield would be helping this team win right now. Not having them, that hurts.
I agree with you completely, but the question is which team most regrets moving on? Okay. The New York Football Giants had Saquon Barkley. And they let him go to Philadelphia, 60 miles away. You take a bus from the Giants game to go play Philly. You just get in a bus. You drive your car down there. And for him to rush for 2,000 yards in the National Football League, one of 9 guys in the history of the league, in the Giants,
very next year.
in the New York Football Giants' 100th football season. And they go 1-8 at home. I think the Giants regret it.
And by the way, might break that record against them next week.
Yes.
As John Mara's head explodes.
Pretty good argument by JJ.
That was pretty good.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good way to end that one. You told the truth for sure, Jason Garrett. Listen, everyone, we hope that you have a very happy new year. We can't wait to see you for week 18. And yeah, I'm going to go get some popcorn and watch the rest of this game with Matthew over here.
Yeah, Hail the Commanders. Hail the
I'll watch it with you, Maria.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.